for creatives, the key is realizing you are not what you create.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to make stuff and that makes you a creative. Like, you are a creative. And I think that sometimes we tend to collapse like our value with what we did, what we made, you know?
Right.
But honoring the process and then how part of the process is space between those acts of production is really important because we're more than what we make.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Today's guest has transformed from a teenage prodigy into one of Seattle's most influential voices in arts, activism, and community building. Julie C's story reads like a blueprint for cultural revolution. Started with nothing but raw talent and determination, she's built an ecosystem that now supports over 200 artists, runs multiple creative spaces in Seattle's very own Capitol Hill, and has even challenged some of the city's biggest developers to rethink how they engage with local artists. Whether you're an artist, activist, or someone who simply believes in the power of community, this conversation is going to change how you think about what's possible when creativity meets purpose. This is the UpNUp podcast. Enjoy the show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned to the UpNUp podcast on the UpNUp network. I'm your host, Rebel.
And I'm DJ Earn, man.
How you doing, bro?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm blessed.
Grateful.
Blessed, grateful. You already know my answers.
Yes,
See?
sir. Yes, sir.
Blessed, grateful. I want to shout out to everybody in the room, team, guests, right? Always. I feel like everybody who's here contributes to the energy, right?
Yep.
And for those first-time listeners, welcome to the show. As I stated, this is the UpNUp podcast. This is the podcast where we're focused on cultivating culture, right? We do that by providing amazing stories of individuals, groups, movements, people who are breaking down barriers, right? Taking up space.
Yep.
Not only for all of us currently here, but for the next generation, right?
Yes, sir.
Of course, got to shout out the supporters, the listeners, the viewers. What do we call them up here?
Family, man.
Family. Shout out to the family. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the family, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited, though, man. I'm excited to come in and do these episodes always because, like I said, every single one is a new journey, right? And we get to be a part of exploring that, right? And so today's guest is no different. She's a real deal factor, right? When you're talking about the city of Seattle, greater Seattle area, and really just the Northwest in general, in terms of making community impact. She's definitely a true culture cultivator who's keeping everything she's doing on the up and up. A conduit of change, and someone who really is walking the walk that most people talk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A lot of people talk, but not everybody's really walking and doing this stuff that needs to be done. She's one of those folks who has been doing the work for years, and we're honored to have her in the building. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Julie C. Schulman. Can we get a round of applause? Give it up.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm glad to be in Cypher with y'all.
Yes. How you doing? How's the day treating you?
I'm doing great. I feel honored to be the first, interview at the Lunar New Year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Official.
And, I'm really excited to be in conversation.
Yes. Now we're excited too, man. I feel like
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
right
Thanks
on
for having
time.
me.
We always say things are overdue, but I say it's right on time.
Right on time.
This episode's right on time.
Yeah.
So we always start every episode with the quote of the day, right? Get the vibe right.
I've been eager to hear what's the
Yes,
quote.
What you
sir.
got? What you got for us?
So, the quote of the day is short and sweet today. The quote is, "It's never too late to be what you might have been."
That's deep.
Yeah.
Who's that quote by?
George Eliot. Yeah.
Can you run that back?
Yep.
I was trying to run it back in my head.
Yeah, the quote is, "It's never too late to be what you might have been."
What do you think about that quote?
I automatically think about time and how time is not necessarily linear. I practice Reiki, so like part of one of my practices is actually like communing with my past self, future self, bringing that all together, and so that's automatically where my mind went.
Yeah.
As far as that went, the mightas, coulda, shouldas. all exists in the now. So
Mm,
Yep.
mm,
okay.
that's a good one.
Yes,
That's
sir.
real. So Julie, as I mentioned, these episodes are meant for people to come in and obviously speak to their journeys, right? Talk about all the work they've done and how they've gotten to this point. But before we get into your journey, I always love to ask guests this question. When it comes to seasons, people go through different seasons. How would you describe the current season you're in right now?
Ooh, that's a good. I love that question. I feel like it definitely feels a regrouping season. Celebrating this year, like my second year sober. No smoking, no
Congrats.
alcohol, which has
Yeah.
been, something historically for me has been a pretty heavy, crutch. As far as like my own self process.
Mhm.
So I feel like I'm in a season of sort of relearning myself, but also a lot of interplay with, you know, what that means with my creativity, with my organizing,
Mhm.
and with the relationships and building and weaving a community.
Mm. I love that.
Nice. So, Julie, let's take it back. Let's talk about like your early life in Seattle and like what was that like for you?
So I grew up on the east side. I grew up in Redmond.
Mhm.
I'm 40,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a very different east side at that time. It was much smaller, and it was much less diverse. And my mom is from Taiwan. She's an immigrant. My dad is Ashkenazi Jewish, and I would say definitely suffered from addiction and some undiagnosed Asperger's autism spectrum. And so I was the firstborn in my family, but also in my generation.
Mm.
And I I feel like as a result of that, you know, we're kind of the crash and burn.
Mm.
you know, um, I was really everything, going to school for the first time. Um, there was a lot of overt prejudice, like old school racism,
Mm.
like
Mm-hmm.
ching
Yeah.
chong, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Yeah.
type
Yeah.
that type of thing. There was like really stark classism to where there were huge divides in the city back then. I went to a school, Wilder Elementary, where it was either people in the golf courses or people in the trailer parks.
Mm.
And so it was really, I feel like that front, it was a jarring experience.
Mm.
And I feel like I really had to figure out how to navigate a lot really
Yeah.
quickly.
Mm. Yeah. No, I'm curious too because just kind of learning about your story and researching like music was something that really was a big part of kind of your upbringing, right?
Yeah, well, my dad is a musician.
Okay.
Yes, and that was kind of one of his mechanisms of survival and healing. He was super creative. He liked to play. He played everything with strings, but he played like kind of a bluegrass grunge mashup at the
Mm.
time,
Okay.
and it was a big part of who he was. And so it was always around me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was later in life, I kind of went through some earlier traumatic things, that a lot of young women experience growing up. Ended up being a runaway at a very early age.
Mm.
And it was sort of, in my early teens, mid teens, I guess, in my discovery of hip hop
Mm-hmm.
and the community around it that existed here that really helped me synthesize all these different components of my own experiences and my own questions yeah, that was like the field
Yeah.
of reunification.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because I mean, I just know like as we're growing up, we don't realize some of the things that carry us through,
hmm
you know? And sometimes people look at things such as hip hop or even sports as just like leisure type of deals, but a lot of times it's the most important thing for different reasons. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I think for myself, it was really, discovering at the time, because I'm a little bit, younger than the founding, of course, generation of hip hop.
yeah.
And for me growing up, I grew up in, 96, Bill Clinton passed something called the Telecom Act.
Mm.
And that consolidated a lot of media ownership. He removed the caps on like how much one company can own. So radio and media period went from like a really diverse ownership where you could see and hear a
Mm-hmm.
lot to a very condensed. You're listening to the same 5 songs. It's all MTV. It's all
Yep.
Clear Channel.
Yep.
And so that was the era that I grew up in. So I grew up in a very like prescribed corporate like
Yeah.
this new model. And so my first experiences with hip hop were very much like dictated as a consumer, as that being a latchkey kid,
Mhm.
cable kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I started to I went to Sure Shot Sundays, which was
Yeah.
organized by Jasiri Media Group,
Yeah.
and it was one of the only all ages like hip hop functions in the city.
Yeah.
It was
That's a
every
big deal.
Sunday.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah.
big deal.
It was
a
founded by
big
Jay
deal.
Moore, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. Jay Moore. And that to me, I always like put that point as my first like real exposure to hip hop, because it was the first time I saw hip hop in the context of culture and community.
Okay.
And that was like transformative. for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
So-
probably like 16 at the time, I think, 15, 16.
Yeah. Speaking of that,
Yeah.
what led you to like dropping a track at 16? And I think it was with the label Immaculate.
Immaculate
right?
Flave, yeah.
Yeah.
So going back a few steps, I had been a runaway from when I was like 13, 12, 13, started to run away, I ended up at the time in Seattle, and probably still now, trafficking of young girls, that was a thing.
Mm.
I ended up in California, and I fled to Vegas, and I ended up in juvie, and then I ended up in a behavior modification program. And so when I came back, probably like a year and some change later, it was very like, I was in a really dark place,
Yeah.
to say the least,
Mhm.
I was pretty nihilistic. I didn't really have a sense of purpose and a
Mhm.
sense of, of making sense of what I was going through, a
Mhm.
means of making sense or the tools to do so. But I knew I liked music. I knew I liked hip hop, and I knew I liked writing. And so that was really my main way of connecting with others.
Mm.
I think that at the time, because of the trauma I held, there wasn't very, very many other ways that I felt, connectivity with people. And so I was able to rap and be in ciphers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
through that, I met ex-kid from Immaculate Flave who was like, this is dope. You should record this. You should put this out,
Mhm.
And so I would cut class. Like I would cut class. I would leave school and I would go like record and, and it was after I released that project, that EP, that I ended up performing like, for the first time at Sure Shot Sundays. I was on a bill with Orbitron, actually.
Okay.
Who shouts to Orb.
Okay.
Big mover and shaker in, both movement and
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious though, because I feel like you got to be confident. I think, it's one thing to like experiment and because you enjoy doing something,
Mhm.
but then to really like, okay, no, I'm going to create a project. I'm going to actually take it serious. Not only that, I'm going to go and perform. Like there has to be something that lets you know this is more than just something I like to do. I actually think I can do something with this or it can lead me somewhere. Was that what you were thinking at the time?
I think at the time, that's a great question. I don't know if there was as much like conscious thought. At the time, it was really organically like the only space that I felt I could express myself,
Okay.
and the only space where it made sense to me, interacting with others. I wasn't really feeling connected to, the student body at Redmond High School.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
for
the,
sure.
it's so there was a lot of disconnection there, that it felt like this was a container that at which I could at least just be.
Mm,
And yeah.
that's dope. I feel like that's a great example for what hip hop has always been.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Ideally, yeah.
You know what I mean? Now I am curious about how you obviously took kind of your passion for hip hop and over the time, you got into kind of the education space and educating.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Like, what was that like? That merger or that transition between the two?
What was hugely transformative for me was, so I started, at 15, 16. I released that project at 16, I think. And at the time I was cutting class. I got Becca billed, which in Washington State, if you don't go to class, you don't
Yep.
get charged.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I ended up being able to work a way where they suggested running Start as a way for me to maybe not be in the high school environment, but basically took classes at Bellevue College.
Mhm.
And at Bellevue College, there was a professor, Kim Pollock. And I always talk about her because she really like transformed my whole everything. She had a series there, was an interdisciplinary class called Skin Deep. And it was looking at like race, class, gender, and all the constructs sort of around us. But I got my basic credits. So it was like 15 credits, boom, got my English, got my reading, I think psychology was in there or something. And that quarter to me was super transformative because what Kim was fluent in was the cultural text to hip hop. So
Mm.
she helped me to kind of utilize what I was doing as a lens to view sort of to make sense of what wasn't making sense to me.
Like
Right?
like inequalities and stuff.
Inequalities
Yeah.
and feelings of not belonging, feelings of objectification, and this lack of purpose, and like, why do I feel fucking crazy,
Yeah.
in these systems that aren't built for us,
Yeah.
She really gave me not only like that critical analysis of society and the historical context of these systems, but also really encouraged me using hip hop. Like she would let me write essays in like bars and shit. Like
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
she was incredible. She really like encouraged that use of what I was already doing to, apply that to my education. And so I
Yeah.
really credit her a lot. Shouts to Kim. She's still
Yeah.
there. She founded the Ethnic Studies Department at Bellevue College.
Mm.
And she's, still there changing lives.
Yo,
I'm
that's
sure.
that's actually that's
Yeah.
actually dope because I think there's always a way things can be transferable. You know what I'm saying? And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes you just have to let people know, hey, what you're doing is great. And I think it could also be great if you just maybe steered it this way.
Yeah,
You don't got to really change anything you're doing. You just have to change your perspective on it,
yes, totally.
Yeah.
And I credit her for a lot of that. I think, that course and that mentorship was really why I finished, school. Why I was encouraged to even finish school. I was able to complete my associates, and then I transferred simultaneously, kind of finished my bachelor's with Antioch. And at Antioch, with Kim on my degree committee, because we were able to curate our own there, kind of continued that, like looking at my own experiences. They allowed you to do this thing called documenting prior learning, where the credits were only $100 if you like create your own concepts and courses. And so there I was able to like connect with, like build on sort of that interest of like, okay, this is how I'm learning about myself and the world, but what do I do with that? Because you had asked about education, and through that process, and there was another woman, Wanda Hackett, who was another incredible like mentor who really taught me sort of the lineage of hip hop in a different way, as far as the cultural legacy of like emceeing, Nomo, and art, and so that was like a whole infusion. And I was able to finish my bachelor's and was really interested in like, okay, I've kind of had this opportunity and these like incredible people to show me this path, but like I'm seeing like some of my peers not have the same opportunity as like artists who have been so transformative in my own life, like how to reconcile this,
Yeah.
And I remember at the time when I graduated, I hit up King Chasm. I don't know if y'all have interviewed Chasm, but
No,
he's
we
the
haven't.
founder of Mad Crew, an organization called 206 Zulu.
Okay.
Super dope organizer from South Seattle. And he at the time was coalescing like a local chapter of Universal Zulu Nation. It's a complicated story, but I was like, man, there's all this shit happening. There's all this like academic discourse in hip hop. There's all these applications of hip hop in like education. Like let's go to this conference that was happening in Cleveland at the Rock Hall at the time, this hip hop education conference, and check that out. See what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Share what we're doing here, and the kind of work that's happening in Seattle, and find out more. So we went to that. I was like 21 at the time. We flew out to Cleveland. The Rock Hall is a very corporate institution. So this is where I like kind of learned like, okay, there are these commodification of, hip hop and its cultural practices and commercialism. But there's also this commodification in the nonprofit industrial complex, in like these other layers of the conversation. We found out the Rock Hall was essentially trying to sell their packaged like hip hop education program to educators,
Got it.
school districts.
Got it.
And they were sort of utilizing, but what was valuable about that experience was that we met a bunch of different organizers who were at the conference who were either presenting, or there to, find out more similar to like where we were there.
Yeah.
And they were doing incredible work. We met Asha Rule from DC and Marcel Runel. She worked with the organization at the time called the Hip Hop Education Coalition, and Shamako Noble from Hip Hop Congress. We basically met all these like organizers
We're doing
who
the
were,
same thing you guys
really
are.
intentional with the culture and trying to, see how to not only utilize hip hop in this positive way to impact young people, but also build power. So that was a really eye-opening experience. Learned about like the National Hip Hop Political Convention, which started in 2004.
Wow.
And just this whole like other layer of organizing that was happening really like opened my eyes.
Yeah.
And so coming back to Seattle, I really dug into, okay, well, what was happening in Seattle at the time and what's happening in Seattle now. And there are, of course, people like Laura Peace Kelly, Elisa Enrico, Silent Lambs Project, Just Media Group, just people really putting in this work that was like real. It was like the foundation,
Yeah.
and it had this lineage that extended to like Black theater in the 70s and the Black Panthers in the 60s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was this definite continuity that for some reason no one was really talking about or like sharing or, there was all these gaps in the transmission of that knowledge.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about what you said about like the commodification of hip hop, where it started off very pure and then it became something that was very profitable, and then like I'm noticing like as time moves on, we get further away from the essence, but there's so many people out here trying to keep the essence alive, and I think there's a place for both. I think hip hop being as influential as it is, like we deserve to be compensated for just how effective the culture of hip hop is, but at the same time, that can't be all it is.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And also too, I think that, going back to talking about universal illumination and like the origin stories of hip hop, because there is this tendency to sort of romanticize of, the purity of the origins. I think like art and cultural practice period is like pure, right? Like people to create, people to express. And hip hop is special because it encourages that it is a tool of decolonization and re-indigenization, and like a path to connecting to that in a world where we are very much taught the opposite.
Yeah.
At the same time, hip hop for the longest held this origin mythology around a man called Africa Bambaataa, who they called the godfather of hip hop.
Yep.
Who was exposed, about like 15 years ago. But people knew longer than that. Was essentially utilizing the culture in his organization to take advantage, and sorry, trigger warnings to those listening, but to molest boys and take advantage of young people in this community and probably around the world.
Yeah.
And I feel like, it's interesting because this was given to us as like the example of the ideal and the purity and the, this is the Amun Ra, the, godfather of the culture who first brought people together and stopped the gangs from beefing. And, this really concentrated like myth basically.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting because, hip hop recently, celebrated its quote unquote 50th anniversary. I think it's very hard to pinpoint when the beginning of a culture really starts. You know what I mean? But
true.
But I feel like a lot of the energy around the collective conversations around like collected change in hip hop. Like there was, like, in the celebrations, I feel like there was a lack of discourse about that. Like,
Yeah.
no one is talking about that and
Yeah.
about that, like, um, that shared trauma.
Mhm.
I think,
Yeah.
and so it's been interesting, you know, like to watch. Uh, I always, you know, try to resist the like romanticization of like the roots because, you know, ultimately too, it's a microcosm of
Yep. Yep.
broader systems.
Yeah.
And, you know, it has its power, like every other.
Yeah. I think it was more so the energy of what it was meant for.
Yeah,
Like that's what it was. Now, as far as people are flawed.
people are
You know what I'm saying?
flawed,
So people
indeed.
involved, like I mean, you can't take things at face value. So someone
Right.
like him, you know, a lot of people have things that we don't know about, right? But the culture in itself is not about one person.
Absolutely.
And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like,
Absolutely.
but again, I think just the influence of it um, is limitless. But I also wanted to ask you, like, when it comes to education and using hip hop as a tool for education, like, is it becoming less receptive to the youth now? Like, how has
Mm,
that been?
I don't know. You know, I think it's different because the there's so much access to the means of producing,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like is very healthy. But I think sometimes the way that my generation and the elder generation approaches it can be very like top down. Like it should look like this. Like rap about
Yeah.
this. Make it.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like this
yeah,
isn't hip hop. This isn't hip hop. What are
yeah,
you doing?
yeah,
And I feel like that's. I feel like when you encourage like creativity, period. You know that's where like the jewels are, and that's where it's the
Yeah.
most powerful. And I think that there's lots of people doing that work.
yep,
But I do think that I do think that you have to meet folks where they're at, you
yep.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Real talk.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because like now we're in an era where like a lot of artists or hip hop artists, you know, they're pandemic like youth, so
Yeah.
like they
Yep.
didn't come up with an opportunity to gather,
Yeah.
to perform live. And so it's a different relationship to the practices, not to the culture necessarily, but
Yeah.
like they had different tools and
Yeah.
different limitations.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I think that we're still learning how to connect and support with like those realities.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you.
I think like even just kind of like the way I kind of seen it from era to era was kind of like the same thing because
Mhm.
it's like the older generation of hip hop is kind of like, oh, this is, you know, they're kind of like pointing out like this is you supposed to, like how you're saying it's supposed to be
Yeah.
like this, supposed to be like that, but then when they were young, that was kind of the same thing that was happening
Right.
to them, you know. So
Exactly.
it's kind of interesting how it's like, yeah, meet them where they're at because you were there at one point, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's real.
yeah.
So Julia, I did want to kind of like steer into just the community work you've been a part of, right? And there's a long list, right? Whether it's you know, on the block, and then as well as Forever Safe Spaces. Let's start there because I do want to touch on that. Like, how did the Forever Safe Spaces start? And if you can also explain to like audience members like what it is.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Forever Safe Spaces, co-founded with Carolyn Hitt. Shouts to Big C.
Mhm.
She's amazing. In 2020, in the wake of the pandemic and the protests on, you know, CHOP specifically, just to name it.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
And we founded it as, you know, a force that we say self-preservation for frontline artists, healing, and community upliftment. And we always said with the ethos of mutual aid, and really it was about preserving, because at the time, you know, during the pandemic, a lot of our spaces of creation were at risk. But
Yeah.
it was holding the spaces and ensuring that there was there was space to
Yeah.
create, to
Mhm.
gather, and to cultivate artistry that was experimental, that was radical, that was you know, maybe not necessarily on the commercial level, corporate level, but would support artists as whole people and
Yeah.
not just what was produced.
Like come as you are.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's real.
I think both Carolyn and I share the experience of art being really transformative to our own process and healing and growth, and really believing that that process is valuable and that creativity and cultural work, period, should be valued for that and
Yeah.
not just as the product.
Mm.
So it was really, out of that, out of recognizing, you know, what does like mutual aid for creatives or through the lens of, you know, creative networks look like,
Mhm.
um, and attempting to tackle these like very practical, you know, challenges at the time. Like, how do we support each other? How do we support our communities? In the beginning of the pandemic, I had coalesced an effort. So Carolyn had founded Forever Safe Space, or Blue Cone Studios,
Okay.
about a decade before, actually celebrating the decade birthday this November.
Dope.
Nice.
But we had connected, you know, probably like 2018, around then, because she was holding these like art drop-ins every Tuesday teas. People in the community would come together. She had like a booth that people could do drop-in recording sessions. And so that became like a galvanizing point on Capitol Hill. I had a coalition at the time that we were kind of utilizing music and culture to address inequities in development processes. Artist Coalition for Equitable Development. I had a history of abolition work as well with No Juvie Jail. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, we had brought together this effort called the Seattle Independent Artist Sustainability Effort.
Mhm.
And that was really to document the impact that the pandemic was having on like, our spaces, on the creative community. 'Cause,
Okay.
like, a lot of people's opportunity for income just kind of dropped.
Yeah.
out from under
Yeah,
them.
for sure.
I got
yeah.
furloughed, like a lot of people, you know.
For sure.
So we did a lot of gathering and organizing and like sort of how to, you know, support coalescing resources, mutual aid, working with COVID-19 Solidarity Network. And when George Floyd was murdered, there was also a coalition that started called Decrim Seattle.
Mhm.
And this was the abolitionist formation that was super involved on the ground. And so when CHOP emerged and our spaces, you know, the space of Blue Cone was essentially front lines, you know. Both Blue Cone and Vermilion were, you know, key in sort of the setting up the resource stations at the time.
Got it.
And it was just, and it always is like creatives on the front lines.
Yeah. Yeah, that's real.
So, so that was a kind of a roundabout, I guess, answer.
Yeah.
But you know, it was really and remains really important to us that, you know, we believe in artists as a force of change. As we believe in that everyone is an artist, one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the connection to your creativity is what pushes change,
Mhm.
and particularly radical change, which is so necessary now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes a lot of creativity. So the work that we do right now, we hold, there's 3 different studio spaces as Forever Safe Spaces. And the concept Forever Safe Spaces is actually a social purpose corporation. We aim to share ownership with the artist ecosystem that we serve.
Got it.
That's why the model is as it is. And it is constantly evolving, you know. We use the word ecosystem a lot because, you know, it's not just Forever Safe Spaces, it's the individual studios, it's the crews and collectives that are involved.
Yeah.
Individual LLCs or formations on their own. On the Block is the LLC, and there's just it takes a diversity of tactics.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hold space for radical art.
Yeah. Definitely.
I seen something in Converge article with shout out Converge.
Shout out
Big
Converge.
shout
Shout
to
out Mari and
Converge.
all
You
them.
said you're like creating a pipeline for like cultural workers to like thrive, not just like survive in a sense. So that really resonated with me because it's kind of like, are we doing it to be great, or are we just doing it to just kind of be, you know? So that really stuck out to me too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. We host, we're like a host site for the in partnership with Folk Life for their creative and cultural workforce development program. So we've hosted about 6 rounds of internships through there.
Mm-hmm.
And last year we got support from the state's Community Reinvestment Fund. So we're able to hire on a lot of the folks who have been on our team.
Mm-hmm.
And we really, our thing is shifting how the creative and cultural labor is valued.
Yeah.
And we really want to pour into our community, which is sometimes challenging, the
Yeah.
economic
Yeah.
realities
It
of
is.
the systems.
Yeah.
But, I think that it's important to both empower people to have the tools to thrive in the systems as is,
Yeah.
while also striving to transform those systems.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think
Right.
also like when it comes to the creative space, I think it's tough because you're trying to express, and then not everybody has intention to like lend their creativity towards like a greater cause or to make changes in the community or to provide a public benefit. That's not the case with everybody who's creating. And I think it could be a gray area for those who are seeing the creative space and saying, well, how do I know who's really doing it for this reason and that, or not doing it for that reason? And so I think when you're talking about yeah, we're creatives, we're artists, but we're going to intentionally create something that is designed to address a certain issue or multiple issues, then it becomes more tangible for those who see it as like really valuable work. Don't you?
Mm.
Do you feel that way?
Yeah. Yes. I think, but I do think though that, yes, I do
Yeah,
see it
yeah,
that way.
yeah.
But also I feel like, some people, it takes some people are creating out of the way that they're seeing things be done,
Yep, yep.
And I think that when there's space for something different,
Hmm.
then it opens up a lot more avenues for like exploring, okay, what do I really want to do? Am I
Yeah.
just doing this because it's the formula that I've seen? Is the formula even designed to like work?
Yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah.
for the majority of like, music is it is challenging. It's
Mhm.
challenging overall. So we really try to just have that space and not even dictate necessarily what it looks like for
Yeah.
our resident artists involved. We say resident artists to mean like the creatives who have access to our spaces.
Got you.
We network about 60 people, and they are the ones who create like the drop-ins that we have. We
Mhm,
have
mhm.
I did the math yesterday. In 2024, we had 342 different events,
Wow.
like
Nice.
open studios,
amazing.
recording sessions, and workshops and drop-ins. But this is all like initiated by the exchange being like folks that access to our space and then provide some sort of play it forward
Yeah.
to the community. And this is really
That's amazing.
having
Yeah.
faith and giving people the space. I think that's where we find like people do amazing things with that
Yeah.
space.
That
you
that in
know?
itself is the
Exactly.
offering.
Right.
Is addressing the issue.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's real.
And I think it's interesting because tying it back to like hip hop, a lot of the times they're like, oh, it has to look like this, or you have to be talking about this,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
to be like revolutionary or conscious or whatever. But actually, people come with very like revolutionary, or conscious, or transformative solutions just when they have the space to do it.
That's real.
Um,
That's real.
and that's been really inspiring to see like the team that we have around us. It's just been really beautiful and
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's dope.
incredible young folks.
I can't wait to come check out the spot.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. I also wanted to ask you, like, for creatives as a whole, sometimes we tend to like hesitate a little bit, like when we're trying to do something. So, like,
All the time.
how? Yeah, exactly. So, how important is it to pretty much like follow your intuition?
I think that that's so vital, and it's tricky. This is something that I'm trying to be, and in the past 5 years have been like like working on
Yeah.
a lot, because I realized that because of some of the things that I went through, that disassociation with my own like body and with my own with myself and my intuition was a survival tactic for me, and I think it is for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And so, we turn to these mechanisms, and it's not the case for everybody, but like mechanisms of, addiction and alcohol and tree, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even just like the scrolling of the internet and the
Yeah,
whatevers,
yeah.
it's like the world is so much that we have to like turn off,
Yeah.
And so I think I'm still learning that. I'm still learning, like, okay, what are the ways that I can reconnect with my intuition? Because I feel like that's so vital to us trusting ourselves,
Right.
and being in our bodies. And, you know, when we're able to do that, then we can kind of slow time and like challenge, the way things are a little bit differently.
That's real.
But I feel that so much. Like I struggle with that all the time, like imposter syndrome and
Yeah.
second guessing.
Yeah.
It's even daunting to do interviews and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, historically, like I don't have any videos out because I've always felt very challenged, like behind the camera.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so I think it's very common for artists.
Right.
Yeah. It comes in waves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like there's a wave. There's like moments when you're like, I'm out here. I'm
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
I don't care. Then you just get back into your little bubble. You're like, nah, I'm not doing nothing.
Yeah.
It'd be like that. So that's real. Now you mentioned On the Block. I think
Yes.
I want you to talk about On the Block. One reason is because like number one, it's like one of the dopest festivals out here.
Thank you.
And because of how collaborative it is, I've seen it. So for those who do not know what On the Block is, can you explain kind of what they can expect when they do attend it this year? Because anybody who's listening is gonna go attend it, right?
Definitely.
All right.
Yes,
Bet.
on the
Definitely.
block. Definitely come to On the Block. So, the block being 11th Avenue, between East Pike and Pine is where our studios are. But the the brand On the Block, or I guess the title, the container of On the Block started 4 years ago, and it was brought together by Carolyn at Blue Cone and I, and Diana at Vermilion. So big shouts to Vermilion Bar and Gallery. She is kind of a matriarch of the block as far as holding space for like different art. And Throwbacks Northwest, Rio. Shouts to Rio.
Shout out Rio.
Rio.
Who is also a hip hop head
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But really, really cares about community. And so we came together when Throwbacks moved to the block. It was a funny story because because there was a thrift store there before that kept on windows smashed because it was found out that the owner was married to a police. And so basically, the owner of that space came to Throwbacks and was like, "Will y'all take, like, could y'all move here?
Yeah.
Some of more credibility and, you know what I mean? Just like held by community different." And so when they moved to the block, like we were stoked. We came up, and we brought our little yearbooks. We do this project that we're relaunching this year, actually. It's like a yearbook of all Seattle creatives. We did it in 2018 and 2019. It's been on pause for a little bit for obvious reasons, but we're relaunching it this year.
That's dope.
And we showed, the type of this is the community we're building here. We had done, of course, different activations on the street for years. But the opportunity arose to, there was a neighborhood economic recovery fund that was Seattle Office of Economic Development had put out. And big shouts to Shara from Hood Famous too, who was working at OED at the time, another amazing community builder, who encouraged us to like, oh, y'all are doing this work, you should go for it. So we had applied for that, and so with that, launched the first year, and it looked like a series of 6 events every second Saturday of the month, and we had performers, DJs, local vendors, streetwear vintage, upcycled goods, local artists, and it has just been a really beautiful. It's just really beautiful. It's a lot of fun. We'll be there this year, extending all the way down with our partners ISG Studio to Cal Anderson Park.
Oh wow!
So we're starting in June. It'll be June through September. We kind of had to cut it down to 4 because it was a lot.
Yeah, y'all was active.
Yeah.
Yeah, and permitting fees definitely went up. But it's just, and it's free, and that's sort of like the big thing, in that Capitol Hill, we have the block party. It's very expensive. It's all fenced in. And so we wanted to provide space, one, for like our community that probably can't afford that commercial storefront retail space in
Yep.
the neighborhood
Yep.
to come and take advantage of the economic opportunities on the hill, but also to build community. And what's interesting is we found, like, when we activate, like, there's less crime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just feels safer. People feel more connected.
Yeah.
We did a survey last year, and it was really interesting to read like what neighbors had to say
Yeah.
about it. But it was really, for and by like our community
Mm-hmm.
to hold space and to provide, opportunity.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, that's real.
Yeah.
That's real.
What advice would you have for somebody that would want to start on the block type of like creative marketplace, pretty much? Because I know you just kind of brought up like permit fees and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure there's factors that people got to look out for. So I guess what would be your advice for that?
I would say do it.
Yeah.
I would say do it. I personally have a long history of organizing, like
Yeah.
other events that are
Yeah.
not permitted, that are,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? But I would say to just start and to connect and to reach out and to ask
Yeah.
questions to other folks that are doing the work, um, and to be curious. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. Um, I think that the key is the symbiosis. I've heard from a lot of vendors, people who vend, because it's a lot of labor.
Yeah.
Like people who do pop-up events, like to set up, to break
Yup.
down,
Yeah.
to
Yup.
it's a grind.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot in that community, from our community, that at some vendor events they feel really like exploited, and they're
Mm.
charged too much, and they don't feel like there's a lot of promotion, and they feel like they're there to fill in bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I
Mm.
I always think, like, when it comes, like, figure out how to create a situation that is really really beneficial to everybody involved.
Yeah.
And it might take experimentation, and it might, it takes figuring that out, which
Yeah.
sometimes takes time,
Right.
Yeah.
but it's worthwhile. And I think getting down to the why. Why do you want to do it?
Mhm.
When you connect with that purpose and you're really authentic about it, then it'll work out.
Yeah.
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 And also, one thing I noticed, that's a good question too, because I think one thing that helped y'all was, you did it, so you were gonna do it,
Mhm.
so that wasn't the issue. But then you also were able to understand, hey, there's probably some resources out here that can accelerate this for us, educate us in the process, right, and kind of get us to where we need to be. So, would you say that's something that folks can definitely do?
Absolutely. And that came from, for me, a lot of my learning on how to access like those types of city resources
Mm-hmm.
came from relationships that I had, and people like Shara, like people from community who
Yeah.
are in those spaces.
Yep.
Yeah.
People like Heidi Jackson. I think that I first learned to write grants because an organizer, Heidi Jackson, shouts to her, she's so incredible, part of the Hidmo Black Power Unlimited team at Washington Hall, originally. She worked at For Culture,
Mm-hmm.
and she had me on as a evaluator of a grant.
Okay.
She started this program that made it easier for people to receive like that county support. And so like asking the questions and building the relationships, and then being okay with being bad and not knowing,
Yep.
that's like
Yeah.
a big part of it.
Yes.
Yep.
That's a fact.
Because it's only through that you figure out what you don't know, and then
Yeah.
you learn it.
You learn. Yeah.
And looking for those allies, like on the inside, like that's really key. Like there are people there, and it might not be the first email, and it might not be the first DM or whatever.
Yeah.
But like
Takes time.
sort of
Yeah.
being relentless on the reaching out.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also think like, because even in our case, being able to like have partnerships and be able to get grant funding, that's one thing I always mention is like, it is a relationship sometimes where you just have to go and really do the work
Mhm.
and keep people in the loop of how your work is effective, you know, because people don't know, right? And I think a lot of times people just say, "Yo, we're killing it. How are y'all not seeing this?" And it's like, no, you got to really track what you're doing, and just keep people up to date with how things are progressing because there's a lot of work being done out here.
Yes.
Yeah, so I love that. I love that you're giving these gems because there's a lot of people who got ideas, and it's not so much that your idea is not good enough. It's just sometimes it just takes a matter of knowing, hey, what direction should I go in, and what resources are available,
Absolutely.
and then let me just go and see if I actually want to do this for real.
Yeah. And then, yeah, absolutely. And talking to people who have done it, who are doing it. There's going to be some people out there who do see you as competition, who maybe, you know what I mean, won't be.
Yeah,
But there's also going to be a lot of people, you know, who don't look at it like that at all.
yeah,
And, you know, for us, that's sort of our, like, we share the jewels.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
happy to share. Y'all can hit me up. I'll, you know, tell
Yeah,
you
yeah.
each of the things we got and how, you know what I mean? We share like, we really believe that, you know, working together, even if we're all like applying for the same thing, you know,
Yeah.
like working together makes us stronger in the end, because there's
Exactly.
always going to be another grant, another event, another organization, but
Yeah.
the relationships that are across and through, like, that's what sticks.
Yeah. No, real talk.
It's like we could all get enough of it, or like
Exactly.
there's space for all of us to get a piece of the pie. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I also just my thinking is always about like the ecosystem. So I actually feel more comfortable knowing that there's someone out there trying to go as hard as I'm trying to go for something. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Yep.
Because it does, you don't feel alone and like, oh, you don't want to be the only person who cares about an issue or is
Yeah.
trying to fix an issue. You want more people doing that. So, but it is a perspective thing, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely how you build like an economy for something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when there's a group of people like kind of pushing something forward. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's real. Speaking of economy, one of the like, I'm not gonna say it's like a buzzword, but it's something that's been very much popular is the creative economy,
Mm.
like the term creative economy. We had the opportunity to do a live podcast at the Creative Mixer series last year, which was super dope, and it also like opened my eyes to like, yo, man, there's so much history creatively in the city, in this region we didn't even know about. We were learning about
That
stuff
was crazy. Yeah.
in terms of like the music industry of like certain major records, like worldwide records that were either written in Seattle or produced. And so there's a lot of stuff that's left out. But when it comes to the creative economy, like how do you view it currently? And then like what do you think needs to change? Or
Oh, that's a good
yeah,
question.
because it's
That's a good question. I would say that's definitely a buzz term.
Yeah,
I agree with
okay.
it, you know, and it makes sense. But, you know, for me, I believe that the work we're trying to cultivate is like locally rooted, locally led, and artist led. When we talk about a creative industry, you know, we're talking about artists. Artists are the key producers, you know, cultural producers. Like, but right now, within the current economic system, artists are not the drivers, and you know, those in power.
yeah,
For the most part, in the creative economy, it is corporations. It is, you know, it is including technology. It is
Yeah.
including, you know, all these, and then these are like real, you know.
Yeah.
We talk about the drivers of creative economy. You can't take away like the Amazons and the, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, from
Yeah.
these conversations. And
Yeah.
these are folks who have economic interests that are not necessarily aligned with that of the majority of those contributing to that economy. So we really look at it as, you know, to develop a healthy creative ecosystem, it has to be locally rooted. It has to be driven by artists and driven by artists who are probably most likely most disadvantaged currently by how things are. And so that's why we talk about like on the block. We call
Yeah.
it hyper local.
Yeah, I like that. I love that term. I love hyper local.
Because, you know,
yeah, I love that term.
we have the marketplace as the event, but we also have the studios that are doing the workshops, and we offer our spaces as a resource, and our homies across the street are shooting their merch in our space.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it really is this exchange, and we want to see this everywhere.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because it is when we have like a locally, really hyper locally rooted, you know, creative economy, this is where like folks have more opportunity and agency to define um, the the value, what is valued in that economy,
Yeah.
and how power is dispersed or operated either on
Yeah.
or through, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's interesting because I feel like creative economy is such a buzzword.
Yeah.
And a lot of the civic conversations around creative economy are so fragmented. You know, the OED that doesn't necessarily talk to the Office of Arts and Culture, doesn't necessarily talk to like the state elements and all these the state Washington creative,
Yeah.
you know,
But they're all interconnected.
initiatives.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah,
interconnected in some way too.
they are.
Yeah.
They are. But I think that, you know, building with your direct community and those you create with, and you know, the hyper local, that's the jewels there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's real. When I heard, I think, yeah, that hyper local term is so real because it's local, but then I guess what's the difference? What would you say between local and hyper local?
Shoot, Amazon's local.
Okay, there you go.
You know?
There you go. There you go.
But I think down to like the block level, you know, how do we build relationships where, like, you know, we can, you know, if you have, like, you're here in Jack Straw, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, is there like artists in this neighborhood, or like the retail stores down, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, what could those relationships be and look like, and how do we strengthen each other? Yeah, that's
I get it.
that's
I get it. I love it.
local.
Yeah.
Should there be an UpNUp festival down here on this
Yeah,
spot? You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Oh,
Or like,
look-
you know,
Ooh. Yeah.
Down. You know I'm down for that.
Yeah, for real.
but I think, you know, there's a lot of when we can apply our creativity to how we relate to each other as creative entities,
Yeah.
that I think that there's a lot of value in that. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
You got to celebrate each other
Yeah.
too. We have to empower each other because that's the only way the hyper local thing is going to really take off too.
Yeah.
Because you got to be active and proactive and recognizing all those that are actually doing work.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah. So just kind of switch gears a little bit. As creatives, like, how can someone like balance themselves, like not really burn themselves out, but still kind of like move forward at the same time?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. I want to hear this answer.
I'm learning a lot
I
about
need it.
that still too. You know, myself personally, you know, I've found like I've started to lean heavily on like meditation and yoga and just like practices of stillness
Yeah.
and stopping. And I'm very much like, you know, still learning that, because it is necessary to give yourself space and
Yeah.
breathing room, and an opportunity to like synthesize. The pace of things is so grueling, and the demand to just produce.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that for creatives, the key is realizing you are not what you create.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to make stuff and that makes you a creative. Like, you are a creative. And I think that sometimes we tend to collapse like our value with what we did, what we made, you know?
Right.
But honoring the process, and then how part of the process is space between those acts of production,
Mm-hmm.
is really important, because we're more than what we make.
Yeah.
You know, that's
That's
a very
real.
like capitalist way of valuing, and we just have to make sure that we challenge when we see that, however that appears, you know, internally, whether it's like feeling the pressure to like, or feeling like the competition and I need to do this and this and this,
Mm-hmm.
like checking in on, okay, what is that voice? Like, why do I need to like,
Yeah.
you know, do
Yeah.
this next? Like,
Yeah.
you know, is that just some internalized like systemic bullshit? Which
Yeah.
a lot of the times it is, you know?
Yeah.
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 Cause
No,
yeah,
it's-
sometimes I find it interesting because people, their first question to somebody is like, "Oh, what do you do?"
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like, "What do you like to do?" You know what I mean? To
Mm.
where it's like you kind of humanize it. Like, what are you really interested in? Not just like, what do you actually do? You know? So
Yeah, that's real. No, that's real. Yeah, I don't think it's not black and white for sure. As far as like the creative burnout or preventing it, because I also feel like when you have momentum, there's nothing like getting that momentum. And what I've come to realize is I've become better at anticipating when I'm nearing
Mm.
the burnout. When I feel like I'm getting there, and then I'm able to like not go all the way or get to that point.
That's dope. No, that's real too because there is like an ebb and flow to everything, right?
Yeah.
Tides, seasons, all of
Yeah.
that. What have you found? How do you know?
For me, it's like I'll see a trend
Mm-hmm.
because it's very cyclical. Like you've burnt out before because you were going so hard
Right.
and you were ignoring certain things or you weren't making time for certain things. So what I've learned is like when I start to see a trend of like I feel off balance because oh man, I normally would be doing this. I normally be hitting the gym or I normally would be like taking time for this, but I'm not doing that. I start to see it become very familiar to when I almost burnt out.
Mm.
So to me, it's very just reflective.
Yeah.
Just don't repeat,
Yeah.
just don't repeat what happened before. And so that's helped me is just realizing, and I think we know, I think everybody knows when they're like kind of a little bit off balance. So,
Yeah,
but like you said, you got to listen. You got to listen to yourself.
definitely making that space to check in.
Yeah. So Julie, man, this has been dropping a lot of gems, but as we're kind of nearing the end here, I'm curious. I was just talking about reflection, but like when you look back, I guess like your younger self, like what's a piece of advice you would have given to your younger self, knowing all you know right now?
Wow. A piece. I would say it'll be okay.
Mm,
Like it'll be okay, and to listen more, to listen more to myself.
yeah.
Um, I think as a younger person, I pathologized a lot of what I was experiencing. I said something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that's probably what I would.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's real.
No, that's definitely some great advice. I'm like, man, I probably would say that to myself too, because it's like sometimes we get stressed out with the present situation we're in, but it's like it works out. We figure it out one way or another.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. Also, I'm curious, what excites you for the future?
Ooh.
It don't got to be like it could be immediate, it could be near, it could be down the line. But how do you see that?
I'm excited. Well, I get to go to the studio today.
Hey.
I'm excited about that. Shouts to Intellect, part of our engineer team. So I'm excited about that because I found that in the last few years, I kind of been less in my own like creative practices as far as making music.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that energy has just been channeled in other ways, I'll say.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about more of the storytelling that we aim to focus on this year with On the Block.
Got you.
I think that we built a tremendous foundation with the marketplace and people kind of know we're there. But there's so much else happening.
Yeah.
And so we're still sort of working through what that's going to look like, but we aim to do some more storytelling and like, interviewing and just sort of the behind the scenes of the day-to-day at the studios and, the people involved in the background. Not even in the background, in the foreground, just parts of the story that hasn't been told. I'm really excited to share that.
Yeah.
We want to share more of the stories for the vendors too.
Yeah.
And because, just like what y'all do in UpNUp,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
there's so many jewels in really making the space to hear those stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's real.
that's what I'm excited about.
Nice. I love it.
Excited about the sunshine too.
Yeah.
Season.
It's coming. Don't worry.
It's coming soon.
Yeah. Julie, how can like people get involved on the block or Forever Safe Spaces? Where can they find you?
Definitely like I'm at Jules C on all platforms. JOULESEA. I respond pretty, quickly to that. I love connecting with people. Just reach out to me. Follow Blue Cone Studios on Instagram. ForeverSafeSpaces.org. I'm pretty accessible,
Yeah.
And I learned this term the other day. It's called everboarding versus onboarding. Everboarding.
Mm.
We are everboarding. So,
I like that.
we
Yeah.
are always open to folks connecting, coming in, checking things out. Once again, we have a bunch of different drop-ins per month that are free. People can just pop in.
Yeah.
To, it's everything from ceramics to like collage and figure drawing and open studio sessions, woodworking, like all that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just come through, roll to the block, say what's up.
Yeah.
Let us
Yeah.
know. We're out here, and yeah, looking forward to connecting with whoever wants to reach out.
Yeah.
There we go.
Make sure y'all pull up.
There we go.
Well, Julie, this has been amazing. Before we get you out of here, we ask every guest this question. So if you can, what's one word to describe what keeps you on the up and up and why?
The people. Say the people. And I think for me, it's sort of looping back to what I was talking about earlier, it's that the energy of connection and finding those points of alignment and those points of like real symbiosis, and like when things really click and you're like, yeah, I feel you. It's that, and it's also majorly inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
People be themselves and do their thing and grow into that and learn more about that. So yeah, I think the people keep me on the up and up.
I love that. People keep me on the up and up too. I ain't gonna lie. I love that one.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, again, thank you for being here. First off, spending time with us, sharing your journey. And we wish you much success moving forward with everything you got going on, the teams you work with, and all the projects. And you got support with us here at the Up and Up always.
Always.
So much. We hope y'all
Always.
pop up on the block. too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm excited
I'll be there.
to plot on some collabs.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah, I'm there
coming.
too.
But yeah, outside of that, we thank you. Look forward to everything you got coming up. And with that being said, I think it's safe to say Julie C is officially a member of the Up and Up. Can we
Yeah.
give it up? Give it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
And that's a wrap.
To continue supporting the podcast and the entire Up and Up movement, be sure to rate, review, like, and subscribe.
As well as follow us at _the Up and Up on all social media platforms to stay connected with everything the Up and Up has coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and until the next one.
Keep it on the Up and Up.